The empty chair had been there every Friday for weeks, and Daniel could not stop looking at it. It sat at the small round table in the corner of the cafe, right under the hanging lamp that gave off a warm yellow glow. He and Claire had chosen that table years ago because it felt private but not hidden. It was where they celebrated promotions, birthdays, and wants. The night Daniel had slipped a ring across the table with shaking hands. Now the chair across from them felt like a quiet question neither of them wanted to answer. They still loved each other. That was not the problem. Their life in Chicago was stable. Daniel worked in architecture. Claire worked in marketing. They paid their bills on time. They had friends. They had routines. But their conversations had grown careful and short. They talked about meetings, grocery lists, and weekend plans. They did not talk about fear or desire or the strange feeling that something bright between them had faded into something safe. Claire noticed the woman by the window before Daniel did. She saw her the first Friday of early fall. The woman had shoulder-length brown hair and calm eyes. She sat alone with a book and a cup of tea. She did not scroll on her phone like most people. She simply read and sometimes stared out the window as if she were thinking about something far away. The next week she was there again. Same table, same quiet posture. "Do you think she's new in town?" Claire asked softly. Daniel glanced. "Over, maybe." There was no judgment in his voice, only curiosity. By the third week, Claire felt a strange pull toward her. Not attraction in a simple sense, but recognition. The woman carried herself like someone who had loved deeply and lost something important. Claire understood that look. Had seen it. In the mirror once during a rough year of her marriage, when she and Daniel barely spoke without tension. On the fourth Friday, it rained hard. The cafe filled quickly with people escaping the storm. The woman by the window stood to leave and accidentally dropped her book. It slid across the wooden floor and stopped near Claire's feet. Claire bent down and picked it up. "You dropped this," she said gently. The woman smiled, a little embarrassed. "Thank you. I guess I'm distracted tonight." Her voice was warm but tired. Claire hesitated only a second. "Would you like to sit with us? It's crowded, and we have space." Daniel looked at Claire, surprised but not upset. He saw something in her eyes, something hopeful. The woman blinked. "I don't want to interrupt." "You wouldn't," Daniel said, offering a polite smile. "We were just talking about how loud the rain is." She laughed softly. It was the first time they saw her truly relax. "Okay," she said. "Just for a few minutes." Her name was Emily. She had moved from Seattle 2 months earlier after ending a long relationship. She worked as a freelance graphic designer and could live anywhere, so she chose Chicago for a fresh start. She admitted she did not know many people yet. As the rain hit the windows, the three of them talked easily. Not about heavy things at first. They discussed books, favorite cities, and how hard it was to find good coffee. Emily's humor surprised them. She was thoughtful, but sharp, quiet, but observant. Daniel found himself listening closely when she spoke. Claire noticed that and felt something unexpected. Not jealousy, but energy. It had been a long time since she had seen Daniel so engaged in conversation. When Emily checked her phone and said she should head home, Claire felt disappointed. "This was nice," Emily said, standing up. "Thank you for inviting me." "You're welcome any time," Claire replied before she could stop herself. The following Friday, Emily came in and walked straight toward their table. "I hope you don't mind," she said with a shy smile. Daniel pulled out the chair. "We were saving it." The empty chair was no longer empty. The weeks that followed moved quickly. Their conversations deepened without effort. Emily shared small pieces of her past relationship that had slowly turned distant. A partner who stopped listening, a breakup that felt quiet but final. She said the hardest part was not the ending, but the silence after. Claire understood that too well. She and Daniel had once spent months living in the same apartment, but feeling miles apart. One evening, after Emily left, Daniel leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. "This feels different," he said. Claire did not pretend to misunderstand. "Yes. Are we just being friendly?" he asked carefully. Claire looked down at her hands. "I don't think so." There was no anger in their conversation, only honesty. They had promised each other long ago that if something ever changed between them, they would talk about it before it turned into a secret. "I don't want to hurt you," Daniel said. "You're not," Claire replied. "What I feel isn't pain, it's awakening." The words surprised both of them. They began discussing things they had avoided for years, about how love can evolve, about how connection does not always reduce what already exists. They did not rush toward any decision. They simply admitted that meeting Emily had made them question the narrow shape they had been forcing their marriage into. The next Friday, Emily seemed different too. She stayed longer. She asked Daniel about his early design projects and asked Claire about the bold campaign she once wanted to launch but never did. "You both talk about your past like it was brighter than your present," Emily said gently. The comment landed softly but clearly. Claire smiled in a sad way. "Maybe we stopped taking risks." Emily studied them. "You don't seem unhappy." "We're not," Daniel said. "We're just quiet." There it was again, that honesty. As autumn deepened, they began meeting outside the cafe a walk by the lake. A small art show Emily wanted to see. A street festival downtown. City lights, the music, the movement of people around them, it all felt alive. Claire felt alive. Daniel noticed the way Emily's hands sometimes brushed against Claire's when they walked side by side. It was accidental, but neither of them pulled away too quickly. There was warmth there. Curiosity. One night, after a long walk near the river, they stood watching boats pass under the bridge. The wind was cold, but none of them moved. "I didn't expect to meet anyone here," Emily said quietly. "I thought I needed to be alone for a while." "Do you regret sitting with us that first night?" Claire asked. Emily shook her head. "No, it felt like something was waiting for me." Daniel's heart beat faster at those words. Later, at home, Daniel and Claire sat on their couch in silence. "We need to be clear," Daniel said finally. "With ourselves first." Claire nodded. "I don't want secrets. I don't want confusion." "You think she feels it too?" he asked. Claire thought of the way Emily's voice softened around them, the way she lingered before saying goodbye. "Yes," she said. "But she's careful." "So are we," Daniel replied. The following Friday, Emily arrived early. She was nervous. It showed in the way she twisted the ring on her finger, a simple silver band she wore from her last relationship, though she no longer considered it a symbol of commitment. "I've been thinking," she began, after they ordered drinks. Daniel and Claire exchanged a glance. "About us?" Claire asked. Emily swallowed. "Yes." The cafe noise seemed to fade. "I don't want to assume anything," Emily continued. "But when I'm with you too, I don't feel like a third wheel. I feel included, seen." Daniel leaned forward. "You are." Emily met his eyes, then Claire's. "I just need to know we're being honest with each other." Claire reached across the table and placed her hand over Emily's. "We are," she said, "even when it's uncomfortable." Emily's eyes softened. "Good." Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, light and quiet. Inside, 3 people sat at a small round table, aware that something important was unfolding. None of them had named it yet. But the empty chair that once symbolized absence now held possibility. And none of them were looking away anymore. Snow covered the city the night Emily came to their apartment for dinner. The streets of Chicago were quiet, wrapped in white, and the world felt softer than usual. Daniel stood by the kitchen counter, checking the oven for the 3rd time. Claire adjusted the candles on the table, even though they were already straight. Both of them felt the weight of what this evening could mean. When the doorbell rang, everything inside them stilled. Claire opened the door. Emily stood there in a dark blue coat, her cheeks pink from the cold. She looked nervous but steady. I almost turned around twice, Emily admitted with a small smile. I'm glad you didn't, Claire replied. Daniel took her coat, their fingers brushing for a second. It was a simple touch, but it carried awareness now. No one pretended otherwise. The apartment was warm, filled with soft music and the smell of roasted vegetables and fresh bread. They sat at the dining table, closer than usual. The conversation began light work updates. A funny story about Daniel's coworker, a design project Emily was finishing. But under the words, there was tension. Not negative tension, but expectation. Halfway through dinner, silence settled. It wasn't awkward. It was honest. Emily looked at them carefully. You said you wanted to talk tonight. Heart beat faster. Yes. Daniel nodded. We don't want confusion. Emily placed her hands on the table. Neither do I. Claire took a breath. Meeting you changed something in us. In a good way. It made us realize we had been living too safely, too carefully. Daniel continued, his voice calm. We love each other. That hasn't changed. But we also feel something growing with you, and we don't want to pretend it isn't there. Emily didn't look shocked. She looked relieved. I was hoping you'd say that, she said softly. The room felt lighter, but Emily added quickly, I don't want to step into something unstable. I've done that before. I won't do it again. You won't have to, Claire said. If this moves forward, it moves slowly, with respect, with clear words. Daniel leaned forward. No secrets. No pressure. No one gets left out. Emily searched their faces for doubt and found none. I care about you both, she admitted, not in a passing way. When I'm with you, I don't feel like an outsider. I feel balanced. Claire's eyes filled slightly. That's how we feel, too. After dinner, they moved to the living room. Snow continued falling outside the large window. The city lights reflected off the white streets, making everything glow. They talked for hours. About boundaries. About fear. About what this might look like. They were honest about jealousy, about insecurity, about the possibility of mistakes. Nothing was hidden under romantic words. They wanted something real, not dramatic. At one point, Emily said quietly, What? If one of you changes your mind, then we talk. Daniel answered immediately. And if it hurts? She asked. Then we deal with it together, Claire said, not alone. That word mattered most, together. In the weeks that followed, they stepped forward carefully. They didn't rush into labels. They didn't make big announcements. They simply allowed their connection to exist openly between them. They began spending more time as a group. Movie nights, Sunday brunch. Long walks by Lake Michigan where the cold wind forced them close. They laughed easily now. The air between them felt charged but steady. Still, emotions are never simple. One afternoon, Daniel noticed Claire watching him and Emily talk on the balcony. It was a harmless conversation about travel dreams. But something in Claire's expression tightened. Later that night, Claire admitted it. I felt a flicker of jealousy, she said quietly. Daniel didn't defend himself. I noticed. Claire looked down. It scared me. Emily listened carefully. You want me to step back? No, Claire said quickly. I want us to be honest. That's all. They talked it through, not in raised voices, but in patient words. Claire realized her fear wasn't about losing Daniel. It was about losing her place. Okay? Emily reassured her gently. I'm not here to replace anyone, Emily said. Okay? I'm here because I care about both of you. Daniel reached for Claire's hand. You are my foundation, he said simply. That moment strengthened them more than comfort ever could. Another week. Emily faced her own fear. She had dinner alone in her apartment and wondered if she was building something fragile. She had spent years believing relationships had to follow one path. This was new territory. The next day she told them, I don't want to feel temporary. She said, You're not, Claire answered. We're building this with you. Daniel added. Not around you. They made small decisions together, planning a short weekend trip to a quiet cabin in Wisconsin, cooking meals as a team, sharing playlists. Nothing dramatic. Just shared life. At the cabin, surrounded by tall trees and a frozen lake, they felt removed from the noise of expectations. One evening, they sat by the fireplace, the flames reflected in Emily's eyes. I used to think love meant choosing one person and closing every other door, she said softly. Daniel considered that. Maybe love is choosing honesty instead of fear. Claire leaned her head lightly against Emily's shoulder. Maybe it's about expanding, not dividing. There was no rush, no pressure, just warmth and understanding. When they returned to the city, reality tested them again. A friend asked Claire directly, "Are you and Daniel okay? You've seemed different." Claire smiled calmly. "We are." It wasn't a lie. Daniel's coworker invited him out for drinks and joked about married life being boring. Daniel surprised himself by answering, "Not anymore." He wasn't embarrassed. He felt steady as winter deepened. So did their bond. They developed quiet routines. Friday nights still belonged to the cafe. The same small round table. The same hanging lamp. But now no chair was empty. One evening, Emily arrived early and sat down first. She watched couples around her and realized she no longer felt like she was missing something. She had found something unexpected instead. When Daniel and Claire walked in together, smiling from the cold air outside, Emily felt certain. They sat down. Their knees touched under the table. It felt natural now. "Do you ever think about that first rainy night?" Daniel asked. Emily laughed softly. "I almost said no." Claire squeezed her hand. "I'm glad you didn't." Emily looked at them, both her expression serious but warm. "You didn't force me. You didn't convince me. You just made space." Daniel nodded. "You chose to step into it, and you both chose to let me," Emily replied. Snow began falling again outside. The cafe window, just like the night she first came to their apartment. The world felt quiet, but inside that small corner, something strong existed. They had faced fear and spoken about it. They had felt jealousy and worked through it. They had questioned themselves and stayed. Nothing about their connection was careless. It was built through words, patience, and courage. Claire looked at the two people beside her and felt something she hadn't felt in years. A sense of growth instead of comfort. Daniel felt alive in a way that did not threaten his marriage, but deepened it. Emily felt secure without being owned. They didn't know exactly what the future would bring. They understood that relationships require constant care, but they were no longer afraid of complexity. As they left the cafe that night, walking side by side through the snow-covered streets, Daniel reached for both of their hands. Claire held on. Emily did too. The city lights shimmered on the frozen sidewalks, cars passed slowly. The world moved as it always had, but for them, everything had shifted, not because they broke something, but because they dared to build something new. And this time, no one walked home alone.